Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm Craig Davis, the editor of Casino Beats. We're here with the latest edition of our Casino Beats 100 Club Pathways series. For this one, I'm delighted to say I'm joined at long last, after some difficulties over the last week, by Raph Di Guisto, who's the SVP of Silverback Gaming at Cannes. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
We'll start off in our usual fashion. We'll go way back when. We'll get onto the career in the gaming industry and the anniversary we've just touched upon of GAM buying Silverback will all come. But before the gaming industry, whether it be leaving college, university, whatever your journey may have taken you, what career options were you either eyeing? What avenues were available to you? Was it always gaming industry or bust? What was it for a young Raphael?
Not at all. So I went to after Imperial, graduated in mathematics, computer science, and then I did financial engineering at Columbia. And most of my classmates actually went straight to Wall Street at the time. So I actually started working in Mayfair for a hedge fund for a couple of years before all this started. Actually making options market and algorithmic trading, that kind of stuff. So there are some vague similarities between what I did then and what I'm doing now. The most obvious one is you had a bunch of very clever mathematicians and clever technologists working on some pretty cool products who are trying to make an edge over taking or making thousands of bets basically. But that's kind of where it stops, if that makes sense. The big difference I remember anyway is the culture. In finance and hedge funds, being a very male orientated and very competitive industry, which is quite different to what the gambling industry is like, even though there are some similarities. And the other thing is that, with games and slots in particular, there's a very artistic side to it, whether it's the artist making the graphics or whether it's the music behind the stuff, so behind the game. So it's just something that doesn't really exist in quantitative finance. Basically 2008 came, and I don't know if you remember, but Lehman was firing, it was going bankrupt, everybody was losing their jobs, everybody's firing. So I kind of started to look at things in different industries a little bit, and that's kind of when I made my transition into gambling, if that makes sense. Looking at different career paths.
Double barrel question here. What other career paths did you look at besides gambling, and what was that first step into the industry?
I'm a big fan of teaching. So, I've always thought about, and it's something I might go back to at some point, teaching mathematics at schools, something, with kids. So maybe that's the retirement storyline for me down there. But what actually allowed me to do the transition into gambling was as I said, 2008 came, and my friend at the time was starting a website called betsfortraders.com. And betsfortraders.com was essentially exotic financial options wrapped up as bets for people from within the gambling industry, from within the finance industry who wanted to bet, for example, on something like, is the price of oil going to touch this point before this timeline, or is the price of, is the FTSE going to stay within this band for this timeline, these kind of stuff. And, for me, it was pretty much the same kind of stuff that we were doing in finance, just wrapped up as bets. And obviously bets are tax-free, so it provides an incentive for gamblers to kind of like use those products instead of, other financial options. And what I found really interesting, because then we moved on from, financial bets to slot games, was that, essentially slot games were being priced, or RTP of slot games were being computed the same way that people would price financial options in the same, using kind of Monte Carlo methods, which are, from a mathematical perspective, extremely similar. So that was kind of my personal progression, from financial mathematics to spread betting and into slot games, if that makes sense. So after betsfortraders.com, we started a slot game company, and within 18 months, we had buyers knocking on the doors.
How did you find it getting into the industry at first? Did you find it was quite an easy transition with your background, or was it a bit difficult? And what was that next progression after that 18 months? What happened with those buyers knocking on the door? Where did you go next?
Our first buyer, the buyer of the first studio was a big operator. I'm not going to list some names here, but big operator, and we basically had a huge amount of financial power once we sold the studio, and we grew the team, like to over almost 100 people within a year or something, and we also had like this kind of playground to use this big operator as like a place to try all our games out, all our ideas, and we tried anything and everything at the time. We really, as you say, like threw everything at the wall and see what sticks. It was great. It felt like being on a rocket ship at the time, and really having the ability, first the financial firepower, and the opportunity to release all these games in a which were being promoted very very heavily. As I said, it was great. For me, I was very much of a junior guy. I was just a math guy. I was in my first startup, and I co-founded it. It was a great experience. But from that experience to my second experience studio, where I was actually the founder, responsible for raising funds, responsible for signing distribution agreements and all this stuff, and then at the end of the day, also responsible for selling the studio to the buyers, was a very different experience. So while in my first studio, I was very much focused on my little area of making slot games, which was the mathematical aspect. I had my little team. We maybe had 4 or 5 guys working on making slot mathematics, to basically doing everything. They joke around there. Like when you're starting your own company, you do everything from building the coffee machine to like building the desks to everything. So having literally to do everything yourself. So while the studio itself was quite similar, it was the same kind of company, my role within the second studio was very, very different.
Like I say, we'll get to Silverback. It's been around about a year, I think a little bit over, if my memory serves me correct, since that transaction was first disclosed. What was the feeling within Silverback at the time? What was the kind of mentality amongst the staff? Was it a lot of excitement at GAN coming along? And just how did those early stages, how did the transaction come about?
We raised a little bit of money initially for Silverback from mostly friends and family, and we always planned to go back to investors after, raising an initial amount of capital. The idea was that, we once we put a few games out, we could raise at a much better valuation. And obviously, COVID had happened in between. Whoever thought that starting a company during a pandemic would be a good idea? I don't know. I've had worse ideas, as it turns out. So we started approaching investors again, with the idea to raise a bit more capital. And with COVID, that hadn't happened, and essentially the US market starting opening, because obviously Vegas had closed down at the time, and we only had like a few states open in the US, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and people started talking about California, New York, some of the big states were talking about maybe opening up to sports gambling and casinos. So what was actually happening was that some of these big US players were starting to look at acquiring smaller studios. But unfortunately for them, all the medium-sized studios had already been acquired. There's been a lot of M&A acquisition in the last few years already. So that's why they started looking at us. We were like a 7-man team at the time, and to be like, okay, well, but also with having the track record of building a 100-game studio or something like that. So they started looking at us like, well, can we buy the whole thing then? Rather than, and can you build like a proper team that can build like 25 games a year, that kind of thing. So this is where the story, this is where the acquisition conversation started coming, and we actually had like it wasn't just 1 or 2 potential acquirers. We had like 4 or 5 at the time, I remember, and it really came down to not just can they provide the funds, what's the price tag and all this stuff. It was also like, okay, well, what's the distribution that comes with it? What kind of background are they coming from? So it was, we had to consider a various amount of options when making our decision. And this is where GAN for us was the perfect, the perfect partner. GAN was, right in the middle of this US expansion. They have an amazing US distribution, and with their financial firepower, in the first year we've almost quadrupled the size of our team. So it's been certainly an eventful year for us. We've started releasing games again. We plan to release 7 games. We've actually delivered 9. So 3 of those are live. 6 of them are on the edge of going live in the US, which we're really excited about. And yeah, it's been a really eventful year in the sense that, growing the team to that respect, going from, doing everything ourselves, doing everything myself, more because as the founder, you end up with fingers and everything, to more or less doing a lot less myself, but overseeing a team that's producing a lot more games was very exciting.
Just going back again to the turn of the year, whether you remember this or not, with the busy year you've had,
Yeah.
is another question. We actually did a written interview for Casino Beats at the turn of the year, not too long after the transaction, and I was having a read back over this just before we jumped on this recording, and two things stood out for me. So at the start of the year, it was kind of two key ambitions, if you will. So I'm going to ask you about how you believe the progression has gone on these two ambitions. The first one was the kind of desire to, like many, the desire to deliver new experiences for RNG players. So I'd like to know how you've managed to do that so far through 2022, and even touching upon how that's going to progress moving forward. And the US, you just touched upon that in the last answer. The expansion in the US, you named quite a few states. Some have gone significantly better than others, as we've seen throughout 2022. But how would you say you've progressed on those two kind of, for me, the key ambitions from what you said at the beginning of the year?
First of all, on our games that are live, we have 6 games live, and we had 3 games live before the acquisition, and we've released 3 since then. And it's one of the key metrics that we look at is obviously the performance in terms of GGR and turnover and that kind of stuff. And it's quite important to note that every single one of our releases has beat the previous one. So we've gone from like improvement to improvement to improvement, which I can't. I really have to back the team on this. They've delivered some great games, and we had to pause our releases for a while we were in discussion during the acquisition, because obviously we weren't sure, are we going to keep releasing with the same distribution channels? Are we going to have new distribution channels? So everything was kind of up in the air for a little bit. But our games have definitely keep getting better and better and better, and a performance metric, it's a great thing. So I'm very happy with that, and I'm very happy with the expectations that we had in terms of new experiences. We've delivered. Our latest game, Tiki Bonanza, I'm really happy with it. It's got this real locking mechanism that's completely innovative. You can't find it anywhere else. So very happy with this. And the feedback that we're getting from not just the operators but the players is that they're getting played more and more. So we're definitely getting our standards are getting better, and the team is building better games. In terms of the US, so it's taken us a while. The integration with GAN is incoming, and we've got these games that are coming live. We're not actually live yet, so that's one of my regrets. That's taken a bit of time, but it's one of those things. We've got these games that are all backed up, all ready to go live. So once the integration is ready, we'll be ready to go live there. We have some really cool games coming out in the US. We've got a really nice feature called, I'll say it here, but it's not live yet. We've trademarked it. The Clockways, where the symbols turn like a clock, and it's really cool. And it's really excited to show for that to happen. The first game to go live with Clockways will be Mega Fishing. That's coming out sometimes in February, I think. We're probably in Michigan at first, but fingers crossed, we'll see. As I said, we're going live on New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and also GAN has a big simulated gaming network where it's free, it's not real money gaming. And the other thing that we're looking at in the US is our progressive jackpot. So we're delivering our progressive jackpot server sometime this year. We're finishing finishing it at the moment, and it's something that we're hoping with our first series of slots. So we're producing a series, the Wild and Free series, where our team has done a really good job at this, and that'll be linked by a progressive jackpot, linking all the three games in the thing, so in the series. So yeah, really excited about this, and it's something to look forward to in 2023.
To end, what I normally do is ask yourself to kind of ask the 100 Club or the industry in general, what if you could ask them one question, what would you? However, we're edging very close to the end of 2022, set to go into the new year. What do you think we need to look out for in 2023 as an industry? What are the key trends going to be through those 12 months?
Safer gambling is always one of those things. We've had a lot of cowboy, lot of stuff going on around the years, you know, especially with Twitch and everything. Like, so I think it's time that safer gambling is taken very seriously. We need to protect our players. We need to protect, you know, minors and stuff like that. So, you know, so I think this is one of the key, you know, things that we need to look out for. And obviously, I think also the expansion in the US is going to keep going. You know, we're looking at different states and everything. So, yeah, 2023 is looking promising for us, but also, you know, we need to protect the people that can be vulnerable.
We've drawn to a close on this. Thanks again for joining us. It was great to have you on board today.
Thanks very much for your time, Craig. It's been a pleasure.